couldn't go to another house. So you mentioned for yourself, I mean, like dads get involved, pick a friend, pick a guy, online, reach out, call. But then let's connect churches to Johnny and Friends and what Johnny and Friends would do to help churches. Like, I'm willing and able. I just don't know what to do. I don't know what my next step is. But you mentioned the three things: money, that's the one, money, space, volunteers, and liability. That's usually the fourth one that comes up. So speak to kind of pastors or people who are in lay ministry and they want to do better. Their heart's there. They just need the how.
So I will just I'll get into that by briefly telling a story. So years ago, we attended a church that we loved and we were at for several years. And the senior pastor came to me one day and said, we're redoing our greeter ministry. I'd like you to be in charge of that. Do you think you could do that? I said, yeah, sure. And the challenge there, of course, was, I had to, find volunteers and a lot of volunteers, and some folks were already volunteers, and some folks I had to really encourage, kind of a thing. But I remember that there was a guy who was a dad, and he came to me, and nice guy, maybe a little quieter, a little more shy, but nice guy, and he wanted to do it. And he said, so what exactly am I doing here? Like, am I like a Walmart greeter? Like what is this supposed to be? And so I had explained to him, I said, listen, here's how you want to think about it. 95, 99% of the people that walk through that door on Sunday are people that you probably know, or people that you at least have seen before, and you know them by face, etc. Don't worry about them too much. I mean, obviously you want to greet them, but don't stress that. Here's what I want you to think about. Think about that family that just randomly walks through those doors on a Sunday. A family like mine once did, who have been through a very intense season of life, or maybe still going through it, have been rejected by other churches. And, more than likely because maybe, let's say, they have a disability in their family. And they are just out of answers. And they're coming here for hope. They have, in many ways, nowhere else to turn, in the sense of, certainly spiritually, but also in just finding a community, finding a home. They're tired, they're weak, they're frustrated, they're sad, they're grieving. What is their experience going to be when they walk through that door? Is it going to be one of welcome and joy? You're home and it's going to be okay. Like, what is that experience going to be like for them? And I know as a family, we experienced that when we first came to that church. And that's why we knew we had found a home, at least for a season or two. So I said, that's your focus. So my message to churches is that think about those families coming your door on a Sunday that maybe have nowhere else to go. And again, I'm speaking in the bigger spiritual sense of, church just never worked for us. Churches just say, we can't help you. Or some churches literally are not as nice about it and say, we don't want you here, kind of a thing, because, your child, however, whatever their designation is just too much for us. No church should ever shun a family for any reason. Now, granted, being in the disability world, I get it. There are folks who have, challenges, and sometimes it's hard to navigate those things or find a niche or a space for it. But no church should just close the door on a family ever. So at Joni and Friends, what we do is, we start from a very simple philosophy, and it's actually, we have a whole curriculum called Irresistible Church, and all of our resources are free, by the way. Okay, we are a straight ministry. We don't charge anything. So someone can certainly get our resources for free on our website, but we have a curriculum called Irresistible Church that's specifically for setting up disability ministries, and it's a series of short books. And the first one in the series is Start with Hello, and that's what we say: start with hello. What do we do? This family just came here. Start with hello. Treat them as people, treat them as fellow human beings in the body of Christ that need a church home. Just welcome them, because that goes a long way with families like ours, to just know that they're welcome at all. Now, in terms of saying, well, but what do we do? Because we don't know about space, we don't know about this. Listen, I have worked with, and we have regional offices around the country. So the thing I want to emphasize is I'm in the Chicago area. Our Chicago office actually covers 5 states in the Midwest, but we have regional offices in every part of the country. So you always have someone you can turn to in terms of this, needing, this type of consulting, I would call it. But, I've worked with churches that, some of the best ones have no physical space. I mean, they have a physical space, but not for the disability ministry. They have no sensory room because most churches say, well, do we need a sensory room? Do we need a classroom? Some of these churches don't have any of that. But you know what they have? They have great buddy ministries, and that's what they lean into. They have great volunteers. They don't worry about the physical space. They have the buddy ministries, and everybody just goes into their regular environment. And one church in particular I'm thinking of that I always like to talk about, but they've actually done a what's called a Disability Awareness Sunday, where the entire service is just about the disability ministry, from the pastor's message to presentations from the ministry leaders to different videos of folks that are being served and all that. But the idea is that you kind of get the congregation to come around it, because another big challenge that churches have is the culture change. And this is something we also harp on. The biggest challenge is not the physical space or the volunteers or anything, it's culture change. And here's what I mean by that. Leaders need to catch the vision of this, right? You can have folks in the kids ministry or folks that maybe want to make a little disability ministry and hey, I think we should do this. Okay, that's okay. But if the leadership, from the pastors to the elders of the board, et cetera, on down, is not wrapping their arms around this, then ultimately it's going to be one more thing that, do we really need to keep it or not? Well, we don't have that many families, so what, big deal. But if you can engage leadership, and then from the leadership on down, you can engage the congregation, because here's the other challenge. Disability ministry, and this is, and again, I could speak to this for a very long time, but the bottom line is that the goal of disability ministry should not be to have a disability ministry. The goal of disability ministry is to get to a point when someday you don't need it anymore, which kind of doesn't, it's kind of counterintuitive. But the idea here is that the disability ministry is a vehicle to get the church to engage in the culture change to the point where everybody is just welcome, however they show up. So little Johnny, who was 5 getting served in the Sunday school, is now 20. He wants to go into the service like everybody else. Johnny has a hard time sitting, and he makes noise and all this. And of course, he gets the looks from everybody who's sitting there saying to themselves, I came here to enjoy the service, and why is this guy making all this noise? Now, to be fair, it's a fair point, but that doesn't mean Johnny should be kicked out of the church. What it means is, how can we support Johnny, right? And oh, by the way, those congregants say, if Johnny makes a little noise, so what? So what? We love Johnny. Johnny's part of this family too. It's fine. If Johnny's having a bad day, maybe okay, he needs to go take a little break or something, whatever. But we love Johnny, right? That's the idea. That's what we're going for. And that's the kind of process churches need to engage with. But it starts with churches being willing just to open their doors to these families, listening to them, asking questions, right? How can we help you? What does this look like for you? And then if they have, folks who, let's say, maybe have, a lot of churches usually wind up having, folks in their community that either have a background in special ed or therapy or whatever, and they can engage those folks in terms of building a program, and that's fine. But where we can come in is, again, we really provide the vision, and we provide the bigger vision to really cast that and get leadership, and then eventually trickle down into the congregation so that everybody says, what, this is something we embrace. This is who we are as a body of believers. And this is our identity as a church, right? No church should ever shut a door on a special needs family, regardless of whatever the deal is, right? And that doesn't mean churches can't be honest with the family and say, listen, this is what we can do now. We can maybe work up to this. This is what we can do now. Does that work for you guys? And maybe sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. But you don't have to pretend to be something you're not, but you do have to be willing to serve, because that is who you are, right? Ultimately, as a community of believers, you have a responsibility to at least open the door to that family. And you can let God handle the rest, right? And see how things play out. And again, this also, folks, I think, also get caught up with this idea of time, do we need to have this done in 6 months or a year? No. When this is done well, it takes years, and that's okay. It's like any ministry, right? It grows, it changes. Some people, decide to serve. Some people stop serving, whatever it is. But the bottom line is that you identify that you always want to support those families, and there are a ton of resources. So again, that's specifically what I do with churches. Again, for anybody listening that's in the Midwest, I probably serve your area, and if I don't, I can connect you to the person that does. But the reality is that we have great resources. And also, what I also love about Joni and Friends now, especially and certainly with me coming on, Joni and Friends also works well with a lot of other disability ministries, of course, that we would be familiar with around the country. So many times, if someone doesn't have, like, if we don't have a resource, I can refer you out to one of our partners and say, hey, you know what, we don't have something for that, but let me connect you with my friend here, and that's fine. So whatever it is, we can figure it out, but it just takes a willingness. It just takes a willingness to open that door, start with hello, and make sure these families know they're welcome.